To the channel, you're with Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. I no longer practice as a theologian anymore, but I got years of information and life experience that I want to try and help people with. Well, recovery from a breakup is a game of patience and wisdom, self-reflection, foresight, insight, self-preservation, growth, going through the motions. It's a journey that millions have done before us and millions after us will do. It's personal, it's confronting, it's challenging, it's crippling, it's exhilarating, and most of all, it's contemplative. The process of working out the journey of a breakup isn't something you can force. It's not something that you can rush. You're at the mercy of the timing of the way in which your soul and spirit and feelings and emotions work to put you all back together again. There is a brokenness that comes with the breakup. That's why it's called break up. It's just a big bust up of everything that you stand for and believe in relative to relationship. And it takes time. There's no schedule for it. There are estimates on how long it takes and all this sort of stuff. But each individual is different. Each person takes the time it takes for them to recover. The first part of a breakup is shock, and it's shock for them. In this instance where I was the dumper, it was shock for me as well. I was wearing out with depression coming from an unresolved triangulated situation that was sideswiping the relationship and had too much control over one side of the relationship, and it became oppressive, deep, dark oppression, thick, horrible. And trying to navigate the dynamics behind it was really, really hard. It was all clear what was going on, but the postponement, the time in which it took for nothing to happen. See, you can waste time. You can allow people to waste your time. And they'll tell you they love you and all the rest of it. And possibly to some extent they do, but they don't love you more than the unresolved. The unresolved is the key to where your relationship's at. When you first meet somebody, tell me they're not willing to resolve. Right? You've got to look back to the way that person was when the relationship started to where they are at that point of the breakup. That's what you got to do. And if it's not matching, there are elements of evolution in the relationship, but if the evolution's backwards, that means the relationship's gone backwards, not forwards. And that's not a good sign for anyone. So you've got to look at how the relationship started, allow a little bit for settling and for familiarity, and then ask yourself, has the relationship gone backwards? Has that person's input gone backwards? Or is it progressing? Is it building? And believe me, if the relationship's gone backwards, guess what direction the relationship's going in? Backwards. You shouldn't really settle for that. You need to recognize these things as red flags. Not against the person or to criticize the person, but just as signs that you're not going to make it. It's not going to make it. The determination's not there. The will for things to grow ain't there. Time that's lost is no longer there. There's a triangulation in there somewhere that you're not going to know about. There's probably an emotional attachment with children and possibly outsiders. Can't speculate, but you can imagine. And everything's just going backwards, but you're hanging on. Well, that's selfish. And it's selfish in the negative. I think one of the most selfish things you can do is know that relationships signaling everything has come to an end and you're trying to stay on. That's selfish. You need to be unselfish. Let that relationship expire. Let it go. Have the courage to let it go. Sometimes it's wise and fair on everyone just to say, look, I'm sick of you, you're sick of me. The fruit's not there. We're not producing what we should. The effort's going backwards. All the signs are evident. We've got outside interferences. The commitment shift has changed. We're turning up physically, but mentally we're out. And sometimes you've just got to have the courage and unselfishness to say, that's it, I'm done. Tolerances can run out. See, it's hard to accept something coming to its time. It's not necessarily a failure. Probably had room to do better for everyone. But what you'll find is as the relationship starts to degenerate, so does the attitudes towards each other degenerate as well. Because there's a sense in the spirit and the mind that as hard as we're trying to go forward, things just seem to be going backward. And it brings me back to the drinker. When the drinker's smoking more and the drinker's drinking more, something's wrong. Something somewhere is wrong. Sometimes we just have to have the courage, if things aren't going to be resolved, to say, well, this is it. Otherwise, things will come to a head when people don't want to resolve things for whatever reason. And there's thousands of them, reasons we can find. If people don't want to resolve things, sometimes we have to accept that the value is not there for the relationship as well. And that's all part of the risk. That's all part of what you're getting yourself into. And as I said, as things, as unresolved wears into the relationship like a cancer, so too does the attitudes towards each other degenerate. And then what happens is one or the other starts to go outside the relationship for soothing. And instead of the relationship being a source of soothing, it just becomes a place of familiarity. And that's just not enough. It's just not enough. It's a sort of a betrayal upon who you are and who they are. It's selfish. It doesn't lead to anything. Nothing good's coming out of it. The emotional attachments are shifted. And this is how you recognize when something's come to an end. This is how you recognize the condition that your relationship's in. And that can be confronting and challenging. It can also be aggravating and, on the other hand, humbling. When we start to become aggravated because of triangulation or other things that haven't been met, it becomes a betrayal of yourself. You're betraying yourself. more than what you're betraying the other person. You're letting down yourself, and therefore you're letting down the other person. We're just not honest enough when we get to that point where it's time to say goodbye, to be honest about it. And of course then we get the blow up, please fuck off and take your stuff with you, and that just tarnishes the whole thing. Then when the dust settles and everyone's gone their own way, you have time to reflect from a different perspective and weigh up and process all the things that happened and how things might have been different. But you can't change the past. It is what it is. You can't change the past. You can only accept it and possibly face it, looking forward, and allow that to shape you in a positive way rather than wound you and leave you wondering. Sometimes we have to accept that we weren't as valuable as we thought we were, and that's why things ended up the way they did. And unresolved, as I said, has a way of undermining the foundations of what was started. It just has. It's the cancer of the relationship. And when people start not to feel as valued as they should, attitudes start to shift, resentments start to burrow in, disdain starts to take hold, and disrespect starts to manifest. And that's the signs. These are the dark, micro-incremental triad signs that you are not in a healthy mind space. And it's time to either come to a resolve or let it go altogether. And the percentage rate for success in this area is below 20%, which isn't good, is it? Below 20%. And that's why there's so many breakups now. Breaking up is a trend now. Some people glorify themselves in it. I can't understand that. To think that you can be so far from where you started, so far from where the relationship began, with all that hope, to end up in hopelessness. See, what we fail to realize is this is all signs of immaturity. It's not a sign of progress. A breakup's not necessarily a sign of moving forward. Personally, it could be a sign of going backward, dramatically backward, personally. And that's why you need to really sit down and process what's happened, why it's happened, what part you played as your own person, how that affected the other person, what was the underlying issue at the core of the problem. Was it relevant? Was it worth harbouring? Should it have been resolved? Or was this the destiny of the relationship, whether there was negligence or not? See, you understand relationships can be sabotaged. And some relationships should not have ended the way that they did. I've experienced this, so many times. I've just been brought to the point of I just can't deal with this anymore. You're not even arguing. There's no yelling and screaming or silly fucking arguments and shit like this. It's just unresolved, just boring at the relationship, just wearing at the relationship. And costs people so much. They try and build, only to see it dismantled. What you build in 2 years or whatever, 12 months, 6 months, 10 years, can be dismantled in an evening. Just like that. That's the way it is. Because people just don't want to resolve. They don't want to resolve. They lose their value. And that's when you've got to be realistic enough to say, that's our time. And as I said, go through the healing processes. Reverend Dr. Jason W. Morrison, Theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now.